Ryanair. Stuck for a present? Give a Ryanair gift card and they love you forever.
Dry with clear spells tonight. Some mist and fog patches will develop as light variable winds fold calm at times. Lowest temperatures generally between 8 and 13 degrees. And now you're up to date. More in an hour.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's Summer Cash Machine.
Now, someone missed Barry's call at 3 o'clock today, which means we have a rollover for the first cash machine of the week. If you've entered since 5 on Friday, you're still in, but you must know the new number, which is €25,071 and 80 cents. Text the word play to 57557. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock tomorrow. And then across the Go Loud network of stations, Barry Dunn will make the call. If your phone rings, answer within 5 rings, give the exact amount in euro and cents, and cash is yours. So the new amount, €25,071 and 80 cents. Over 18s only, text cost you €50. You're playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Terms and conditions are on newstalk.com.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Why should he? Football Show, very happy to have you with us. Michael McCarthy's here in studio. Pat Nevin's going to be joining us presently. Weekend 1 of the Premier League has delivered. Podcast listeners, you've just heard Andy Mitten. We're not going to inflict Manchester United on you straight away. We'll get to it with Pat at some stage. Mick, one burning question from the weekend. What did Jesse Marsh say?
I don't know. What's the unforgivable thing that you can't say on a football field?
Anymore. That was the thing that really added an element of intrigue. Bruno Lage, walking off the pitch, this big row with Jesse Marsh, and he was asked about it afterwards, and he said something was said in the first half, which you can't say anymore these days. Implied it may have been a thing that was said on the touchline, now not.
I actually can't figure it out. You said this to me earlier, and I said I'll have something for him as to what. I'll have a genuine guess. I actually haven't the clue.
Because I was thinking, God, was it racism? Then I thought,
no, I don't think
Bruno
so.
wouldn't be saying that was cool back in the day, so I struck that off.
No, I don't think it didn't feel like it was on that. It didn't feel like it was down that path at all.
Again, for the record, I'm not accusing Jesse Marsh of racism.
Do you remember, we were talking before the break about mic'd up referees? Do you remember the one time they ever did it in football? It was like the David Ellery in like a old George Graham Arsenal game, and there was the whole thing where Tony Adams lost the head and called him a cheat, and everything was fine up until he said that. As cursed blinded, don't call me a cheat.
So high pitched as well, Tony Adams.
Oh, it was the highest pitch I've ever heard. And David Ellery lost it and said that was the one thing you can't say. But I don't think a manager, that might be a referee might say that, but I don't think a manager would have an issue with it. I actually don't know what it is. It's actually intriguing.
It's added incredible intrigue.
Yeah. Wolves versus Leeds, I didn't think we'd be starting the Football Show with, but there you go.
So something you can't say these days, because then I think it was a match of the day. I just had my head in my hands as a journalist. I was crying because interviewed Bruno Lage and he said this, and then interviewing Jesse, and he's like, "Was it something serious or just one of those things?" I was like, "Oh, geez." Guess what Jesse said? Just one of those things.
Yeah, just one of those things. Yeah.
I presume that at Bruno's next press conferences, or indeed up in Yorkshire, he'll be asked about it. But that was one of the intriguing things. So on events at Old Trafford for a moment, we haven't talked at all about Graham Potter. Potter has been one of these figures in the league for the last couple of years that you've noticed and thought he seems like a very reasonable man and obviously doing a very good job. I didn't know much about him.
No.
And he did a bunch of interviews in the Sunday papers over the weekend and came across incredibly well. He's 47 years of age now. So I have Jonathan Northcroft's one in the Sunday Times in front of me. And if you want to place Potter as a player, because at the top of my head, I didn't remember Graham Potter. He was part of that 6-3 win for Southampton against Manchester United back in the day.
Was he?
Yeah. Substitute.
I'm surprised I didn't know that. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. He's at pains in this interview to point out what a terrible player he is. He says, "I was a decent footballer, but I wasn't absolutely great in any position. I was a left back who wasn't great at defending. I was a midfielder. I was good going forward, never at blistering pace, and I didn't quite believe in myself as well." He played one England under-21 game, and that was kind of the height of his achievements. But to be fair to him, like, he is downplaying it. He had about 13 seasons at championship level or higher.
Yeah.
But in his own view, wasn't particularly memorable player. But what I didn't realise is how Potter reached this point. I had just presumed, in the way that it's dangerous to, that he managed at lower league level in England and did something impressive and got the Brighton gig, and that's why he's here. Not at all. So how's this for a decade? So he's retired and he's making his way in the game. He's getting paid 17,000 a year as the University of Hull coach. And his wife at the time was a very successful Pilates business. He's just had a young child. And out of nowhere, he's offered the job at Östersund, who are in the 4th division of Sweden.
Yeah. I know this part all right, yeah.
4th division of Sweden. Sits down with his wife, winds up the Pilates business and goes for it, and gets them to Europa League football. He was saying it's quite interesting. In Swedish football, as you might imagine, it's very physical, big, strong Scandinavian guys. He said 4-4-2, whereas he said his team had a lot of second-generation immigrant players, and there was a real emphasis on technicality over physicality. And he's some interesting methods. I suspect we'll be talking about Mikel Arteta in the coming days and the All or Nothing documentary. At Östersund, he and his players took part in culture shows like performing the ballet Swan Lake and staging a rap concert and producing work for an art exhibition. Recently, Brighton's squad were asked to bring in 2 or 3 photographs of things that were important to them and discuss the photos in small groups rather. And Potter did this as well. So he was talking about the blame culture in English football when he first came, like it was pinned against the wall. You effing did this, don't you do this again, this is your fault. Whereas he said he's completely moved away from this. He did thesis on the art of reflective practice when he was over in Sweden as well, and his tutor deemed it publishable of that kind of standard. But he's just full of kind of interesting things that would make you really warm to him. So like when he was at Brighton, in his first season and a half, both his parents died within 6 months of each other, and then the pandemic hit, and he was talking about how he was feeling incredibly angry, and he couldn't work out if it was the pressure of being in the Premier League or just the devastation of losing 2 parents in 6 months, or I guess a pandemic which was kicking in around then as well. So he says of his father, I thought this was a lovely comment, just a last comment from Potter. He was talking about parents. He was on holiday recently and he was thinking a lot about his parents, Steve and Val, and they died during his first season at Brighton. So what he says in this interview is, I would say we're all a product of our parents. Everybody says I'm like my dad. He was a worrier. So maybe I got a bit of that from him. He worked in a factory. He was an engineer. He did the night shift for 8 years and travelled 45 minutes to his job, and it was low paid, bless him. Liked his football, liked going out playing snooker with his friends on a Friday night. The rest of the time stayed home with my mum. Me and my brother were his interests. And fundamentally, he was a good guy who wanted to do things right and be a good person with his friends and his family. And what's really interesting, I think, is Potter says, I spent a lot of my 20s thinking, oh, my dad, he could have done better than that. If I was him, I'd do better. But age makes us wiser. Now I look at him and I think, wow, he did brilliant. There were fewer possibilities for people then.
There you go. He did the important things well. Yeah, interesting man.
Not bad for a Premier League interview. The morning of a trip to Old Trafford.
I was going to say you don't get these. We kind of mourn those types of interviews in the Sunday papers. You talk about it on the pay-per-view a lot on Sundays, but I guess you could still maybe get them out of people of his generation. But yeah, very, very interesting piece. Yeah. Just an interesting guy. The Ostersund stuff I've been kind of following for years. I remember talking about it on the radio like a good few years ago about them going to the ballet and doing all these things as a group, and it being kind of this forced thing almost, that we do these things as a team and we go outside our comfort zone. Really interesting stuff. I don't know whether it's any use to you for playing football, but their results obviously have done well. But what I did think, I was thinking about this twice actually. I was thinking about it during the game, and then I was thinking about it when we were talking about Manchester United in the news round, is you're not thinking about Brighton enough. Brighton had a huge part to play. They came to Old Trafford and dominated, and they were a well-coached team. And I was thinking this during the match. I was like, this is a team who knows what they're doing and has a plan and is getting the most out of the players that they have. The opposite of what Manchester United are doing, which I don't want to get back to, and the opposite of what my team did at the weekend, and that's all about the manager, and that's a guy who's doing the best with what he has. 4th lowest budget in the league. Yeah. Finish 9th. And you know it. Look around the team and you know it. And then they lose Cucurella during the week. No bother. They lost Basuma in the summer. They haven't really replaced those players. No. You know?
So, I mean, look, wage bill being the defining factor, it seems. Fourth lowest, and they finished ninth, which is quite something. By the way, one last point, and this is just more about the Swedish education system, which had me curious. So he talked about the move home being far worse than the move to Sweden, because his son, who was 1 when they moved, is now 7. And what he said was, he didn't elaborate on this. This was crying out to be elaborated on. He said, our twins were born there, but Charlie was 7. It was far more traumatic moving home. If you're a 7-year-old in this country, as in England, if you're a 7-year-old in this country, you're sitting at a desk and you're doing tests half the time. If you're 7 in Sweden, you're playing up a tree half the day. There was no follow-up. Like, what?
Well, I suppose what they're saying is that you're learning life rather than learning maths.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
One last point before we chat to Pat, who is waiting patiently.
I just wanted to talk to Pat about all this stuff, I think. Yeah.
Aston Villa, who you obviously follow very, very closely, lost to Bournemouth 2-0. Scott Parker, it seems, is one of the really exceptional prospects. And Gary Neville was talking about doing his FA badges, his coaching badges, and Parker was there around then as well. And the word from the officials was they hadn't seen a prospect like Parker in a very long time. So watch this space. So Bournemouth might be better than we all anticipate. That said, Aston Villa losing 2-0, not good. There's the whole Tyrone Mings situation. Yes. Loss of captaincy, his meek enough tweet. I mean, I guess you have to publicly say everything's okay. But then Gerrard at the weekend on Mings, who was on the bench, saying, I'm confident, have the full belief that when Tyrone is back at his best and looks me in the eye and shows me he's ready to play, he'll get opportunities. For Gerrard, there is a degree of pressure coming on.
Hugely now. There has to be. And I think I thought actually that he would get an easier time from the media, especially people who wouldn't have seen this game, like I watched it, than he did. Now, I think people are understanding that the pressure's coming on. I think the way he's handled the Ming stuff has been, I don't want to get too kind of like parochial as a fan and stuff like that, but I'm really disappointed in it. Like, Tyrone Mings makes a lot of mistakes sometimes, is a better player than I think he's given credit for, right? Yeah. But even so, it's okay for the manager to decide we're moving on from this guy. They've bought in Carlos. He liked Konza more than Mings. Fine. Understandable. That's a footballing decision that he's paid to make. But the way he handled the captaincy situation, a few days before the start of the season, he not only makes a new captain, but makes a club captain and 2 vice captains, which I've never heard of before, just to make sure that Mings isn't part of it at all. Okay. And then comes out and makes comments about him, like, look me in the eye if you want to play for this team again. Tyrone Mings is a good guy and always comes across as a good guy.
Does he? Because that suggests that Mings has an attitude problem, I thought.
Well, I've never heard of anything of Tyrone Mings having an attitude problem. He's been a good player for Villa and he's been there long before Gerrard has. And I don't really understand where this is coming from. And I think it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. I think there's a lot of players there who will look at that and say, why is he treating this guy like this?
So if you take the end of last season into this season, yes, it's been a torrid time for Gerrard. What's going wrong? Because
the football is actually a more important thing to talk about here, because it's all very well reacting to a 2-0 first day of the season defeat and looking like an Egypt because I'm calling for Gerrard's head, which I'm not quite, but on the verge of. If you actually watched the game, and I guarantee most of the pundits that you hear from, because there's a lot more interesting games on than Bournemouth versus Aston Villa at 3 o'clock on Saturday, didn't watch it. Villa were pathetic. And I don't mean this, I'm not exaggerating there. They conceded a goal after 1 minute and 56 seconds of the new season from a corner that was badly defended. That can happen, right? How they reacted for the rest of the game was to do nothing. To do absolutely nothing. They played with it like a team with absolutely no game plan whatsoever. Danny Ings was playing up front on his own, which is a weird play. He's not a striker that plays up front on his own. If you play one up front, you play Watkins. He was dropped. Loads of really questionable decisions on this team selection, and they played with absolutely no go forward plan at all. All they seemed to have was try to win fouls in midfield and then have 2 lads over the ball and hoof it into the box from 40 yards away. It was easily clear. They didn't create any chances. Right. They had no discernible game plan, and except for half-arse pressure. So this is another thing. You talk about Manchester United being a bad pressing team last year. This is just a Villa team that weren't up for it. So Bournemouth were doing the short kick-outs. There was commentators like, this is a bit risky now. Villa will put them under pressure. And what Villa would do is they wouldn't stand back and let them have it, which is what you're supposed to do if you're not going to press properly. What they would do is half-arse jog over to them. Bournemouth would easily clear it out and then have loads of space up the field because they've been kind of pressed. So, like, I mean, I don't mean there's nobody's watched this game. There's no point in getting into too specifics. But if you're going to say to me, "Oh, you're overreacting because anyone could lose a game," and Bournemouth are probably underrated and so on, Villa didn't look like a team who knew what they were doing. Gerrard seems to have favourites, like John McGinn's been made captain. He hasn't played well in 6 months or so. Was really bad the other day. Took off Jacob Ramsey at half time. McGinn has to play his 90 minutes. There's a lot of that going on the team as well. Really bad sign. You know, you're talking about Potter maybe not being a great footballer. You know, he's obviously a very good manager. There's nothing to suggest to me that Steven Gerrard's a very good manager. If he is brilliant, I'm glad he's at my club. But I don't see where it is. Okay. He won the league when Celtic collapsed, basically, when Neil Lennon as the manager.
Let's do a piece this week with a journalist who's covering Villa week in week. I want a second source here because this has crept up on me. This Gerrard situation.
Well, look at Villa have won 2 of their last 12 games, and they're both against teams who were relegated last year. His record, and I heard this was on OTB AM this morning. A YouTube texted in, and the lads checked it. His record at Villa before Saturday when they lost is the exact same as Gary Neville's record at Valencia.
There's a real QED there. I don't know how to say that.
There you go.
We'll do a piece on Gerrard and Villa this week.
Please do.
Mick McCarthy, for the time being, thank you. For the first time this season, very happy to say, Mr. Pat Nevin is with us after the weekend that was. Here's a reminder. Oh, we don't have the weekend that was reminder. Thought we had some commentary. We don't. Pat Nevin, you're straight in. Hello.
Well, I'll give you a reminder for the weekend if you like. It was pretty good. Actually, the game wasn't pretty good. It was pretty abject, but it was good to have it back.
It sure was. You were at Goodison, I know, which we'll come to. I guess let's start with the defending champions, Manchester City, 2-0 winners against West Ham at the London Stadium. So I think this Haaland kid's going to be okay. I don't want to put my neck out too much. Did you find the week post-Community Shield of will he be able to adapt slightly odd, or were you slightly worried that it might be a tricky start for Haaland?
No, it just made me laugh out loud quite a lot. Because if you've watched him and you watch the capabilities he's got absolutely, I think, everything just about that you need for a centre forward. Certainly, you look at what he'd done before. Just go and look at a load of his goals he scored before. I understand you have to ask the questions. It's perfectly reasonable to ask the questions, such as, Manchester City are a different style. They're not a breaking team. Dortmund were. But in reality, when you see the amount of chances that Manchester City generally make the way they play, you think, wow, stick Haaland in the end of that, then wow, it looks as if it could be special. But then you look at technically what he did in the first real game of the season, because I take nothing from the Charity Shield, because Charity Shield's it's basically just a friendly.
Yeah.
People talk about it, but it's a friendly, and it's a way to get a little bit of match fitness, and it's no more than that. Whatever is built up by various people. So I took nothing from that at all. When you're playing with Haaland, with the physique he's got, with the pace that he's got, with the intelligence that he's got, the space that he makes, just even the space that he makes for other people is scary. The space that he makes for very, very good players who can do brilliant things when given a little bit of extra space. And, even the likes of Grealish, who didn't have a great season last season, it was okay, but not great. He's suddenly not going to have 2 and 3 men marking him all the time, because you can't. Because you're going to have 2 or 3 people marking Haaland, and he's going to have a load more space to go and create. I'm amazed that people, I'm not amazed they asked the question, but I'm amazed that people think it's even a remote possibility that he won't do at least very, very well. At least.
I'm with you. And last Monday when we were talking about this, I said that Kevin De Bruyne is going to have about 45 assists by the end of the season, and that this guy's going to score a gazillion goals. Can I ask, so take the 2 goals that he was involved in. Maybe start with the second one for a moment, because it really caught the eye. He scored a ton of goals like that for Dortmund. And I wanted to ask you, so Ben Johnson there as centre half can see Haaland as making this run, and this happened again at Dortmund all the time. Centre half seem powerless to do very much about it. Is it just that he's so fast, or has he just picked an angle they can't seem to get near him? Because it just looks like it's unfolding before the centre half's eyes, and they just can't seem to do much about it continually.
Well, the angle of it, the timing of it, the fact that he's intelligent enough to make the run and knows the players who are capable of finding in that moment, in that second. I mean, certainly the second pass through was, it looks simple when you see it. That's the obvious pass to make and the obvious run to make. It's actually not. That's the way it looks in slow motion. Okay. It was a brilliant piece of movement by him, and with De Bruyne, he will lay it there if you make that run. But the thing that actually jumped out to me was another part in the second half, and it was, again, the ball was played up the right wing. I would say he was about 4 yards second favourite to make it against a quick defender, and he won it by about 6. And it was only over about 30, 40 yards.
Yeah.
People often talk about, different types, different pace. His is stupid. His is absolutely stupid. He will make a lot of people look a bit ridiculous. And you'll question them and think, why didn't you see that?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And it's a different type of pace. People talk about, types of pace. There's pace that you can use. Getting from A to B in the same amount of time, people think, right, okay, that's one thing. And yes, it is. But there's another type of physical power pace that you can't get near anyway. Because if you get close to him, he'll just shove you off. And he'll just basically you'll bounce off him. Every single bit of the game just about looked as if, he's not lost a thing. He's got the natural sort of eye for a goal. Someone asked me before the start of the season, did I think Man City will win the league? And I said, yeah. And I've changed my mind. I think Haaland will win the league. Or maybe that's pushing it a wee bit. But when you've got his ability, and then you stick what's behind him, it's scary. There was another brilliant piece of movement he did that's, if you don't watch the game, you just watch him, and he goes to the byline, and it's like, honestly, his reactions are like a mongoose. He's like Rush and all them used to be. Every single possibility, he would chase it in, just in case the keeper, drops it. Even when it's an obvious one, the keeper's going to get it. So honestly, I can't. It's going to be so hard for anybody to stop him. Really hard.
For the first goal in winning the penalty, that was a shorter, sharper movement. Probably the kind of movement he's going to have to make against a low block for quite a bit of this season. And people had questioned if he could do that. I mean, that 5-6 yard turn and run, he can do that no problem.
The problem they've got with, low block, what you mean is deep defending, yeah. I've decided to get rid of some of the kind of cliche, the kind of phrases that are used now.
I know.
See if I hear
low block is not something I grew up with. I've just given into it.
Well, I know, but it's...
Okay, we'll go with defending. We'll go with defending deep on Monday nights here with you. Defending deep.
Can we go for my favourite one of them is absolutely my favourite jargon one just now. And I counted a game recently when I heard this word used 23 times.
Yeah. Transition. I knew it was going to be transition. Called it.
Do you know what transition is?
Yeah.
Right, so low block is defending deep. Do you know what transition is? You gave the ball away.
I know. Transition's a tough one because it really dresses up what's just like the game. This is just the game.
I watched a lot of the women's Euros, obviously, and I loved it, obviously. I do love women's football. But, they're utterly addicted to transitions. But then they did give the ball away a lot.
A lot of transitions. So, now, rephrase the question. Defending deep in numbers, everything's tight, and he made an angle and he showed that quick pace over 2, 3, 4 yards. So, I mean, if he can do that and he's got the players behind him, then against teams parking the bus, he'll be just fine.
He will be just fine. And remember, teams have been doing this against Manchester City for a while. So what do? They get to the bylines and cut back. And they do it with incredible regularity. Now, they didn't actually have to do it that much in this game against West Ham because, they had Haaland to do what he was doing. But they can do it, and they can do it easily. And he already looked as if he was trying to work one or two intricate 1-2s himself to get those positions. If someone's get to the byline and cut back, come on, really? Is he going to struggle? I don't think so. It's made for him as well. So you can go through the middle now in a way you couldn't go before. A way they weren't even close to being as good as they are through the middle. But they've also got that other option wide where they can get to bylines and the almost impossible ball to stop. So, yes, ask the questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to ask the questions other problems. Every single manager will be looking there thinking, okay, what do I do to stop him? And you might stop him, but good luck, because it's going to take 2 or 3 of you, and that just leaves a massive bunch of gaps elsewhere. And I'm not saying they'll go through the whole season, they'll win every game. Somebody will block them at one point, but you know what Pep will say, it's fine. Yeah. We're doing the right things. It'll work over the long term. And he's right. He's absolutely right. It's a bit of a scam to talk about. Was it 50 million quid or 51 million pounds? They talked about the cost. And, other teams like Chelsea are buying Cucurella for 60 million. It's not fair, that's just not a fair comparison at all. It's not 50 million pounds. It's what he had deliberately written in his contract because nobody else could turn down what his demands were at the time. Yeah. And have a look at what he's going to be making on top of that. A contract is a global sum. But if it is 50 million quid, it's the cheapest. And I never thought I'd say the phrase, but it's the cheapest 50 million quid I've ever seen.
And a word on City generally, because I do take your point that Haaland effectively could win in the league, but it was quite striking that what would you say, significant players in the guise of Zinchenko and Jesus and Sterling were allowed to leave. Really, Haaland and Calvin Phillips were the 2 signings, and it seems they rate Alvarez very highly as well. Did you class that as a perfectly understandable summer on Pep's part?
The weird thing is, if you look at the money spent, they've actually made money. Yeah. They've actually, which is staggering. And are they weaker? No, I can't even consider that as being a thought, because they've got other players that they've got coming through. Now, Rodri stayed, and obviously with Gundogan, you've got to look at the bench and then say, okay, is it strong enough? Is it good enough? And I think players like Cole Palmer, Mahrez, Bernardo Silva, we know that he's still there as well. They've got good strength and depth there. I'm not sure it's absolutely finished yet. Right. I think they might get 1 or 2 more in. Remember, up until very recently, there was talk of Ake leaving. So I still think they're looking around, and there might be 1 or 2 that they just right at the end. The business has been done really well. A lot of it's done early. But they'll be sitting there waiting, right, okay, we've got some money in the bank. Well, they've got plenty of money, but they've got, certainly they've not spent all the money they could have spent this transfer window. So don't be absolutely shocked if another player comes in. Goodness knows what position. I mean, maybe a left back, who knows?
It's all looking very ominous for everybody at the moment. We are going to take a very short break. Quite a few things I want to talk to you about on the far side. Our football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Pat Nevin with us on a Monday. Short break, and we're back talking about the rest of the weekend's action.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Lunchtime Live.
I got bored trying to date men, so I tried dating women.
Right.
That was a real eye-opener.
Why?
Because I think women are more critical. They're less fun, more serious. I think I must be awful because I just don't want to really. I haven't found anyone.
Lunchtime Live with Andrea Gilligan.
Brought to you by Avant Money.
Weekdays at midday on News Talk.
Looking for a last-minute midweek getaway? At gobreaks.ie, prices start from only €95 per night, and you can save up to 25% on incredible 3, 4 and 5-star hotels, with added extras like free breakfast. Whether it's a short break before back to school or some late summer leave, find the best midweek deals and go explore, go experience with Go Breaks, as recommended by News Talk.
Go Breaks.
T's and C's at gobreaks.ie.
Your son, who smiles every time he gets a message from a certain someone. The twins, who think your son has lost his mind. Their granny, who knows that if hearts get broken, she's only ever a call away. Whatever your clan are up to, connect them with Vodafone Red Family. Add family members young and old for just €5 a month. Go online or in-store to find out more. Vodafone. Together we can.
Subject to eligibility. 12-month contract and terms. See vodafone.ie/terms.
You've got a lovely, smooth pint of Guinness in front of you. You're surrounded by the best group of people. You found the last table in the beer garden. But the sun's just gone behind a cloud. But hey, any second now. It's a lovely day for a Guinness.
Jolly good company.
Get the facts. Be drink aware. Visit drinkaware.ie.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch over 400 games this season from the Premier League, WSL, Scottish Premiership and EFL. Live on Sky Sports.
You're welcome back. So very happy to say Pat Nevin is with us once again on a Premier League Monday evening. We are looking back on the opening weekend. There's so much to discuss. I'm going to break the habit I have. I prefer going deep with you on a few subjects, but I just want to hit as many things as we can, so we might go a touch superficial if we can. Liverpool 2, Fulham 2. We're talking about how great City looked in so many ways. Liverpool, by Jurgen Klopp's own admission, were very, very flat against Fulham and lucky to get a draw. What has been discussed in the aftermath is their midfield situation. So Thiago and his injury profile is a worry, as good as he is. Thiago, Henderson, Fabinho, not the youngest triumvirate. And you have Milner who can come on. Naby Keita is back from illness soon. Harvey Elliott is in the mix. Curtis Jones has an injury. Oxlade-Chamberlain has an injury. So Klopp was talking on the Liverpool website today, and he was saying in the midfield situation, a transfer must make sense now, but also in the long term. We have midfielders. We still have enough midfielders. It's not that we lack midfielders. It's just some of them are injured. This is not a good situation. I don't like it at all, but we have to see how we react on that. But for sure, we're not panicking. I mean, it's a very Jurgen Klopp Liverpool approach. They won't be panicked into making a bad buy, but there is a question mark over the midfield situation at the moment.
Yeah, he'll feel that, but I agree. I don't think he should panic quite yet. I suspect he's got a whole season to do it. He'll be able to get by with what is there, if he has to get by with what is there, and still be as close as anybody else, I think, to Manchester City. But, you know, they've tried to make the changes up front. They were probably the important ones to really consider because, you know, that front three had been brilliant for a long, long time, but it may well be that you have to refresh that. He does. Mane goes, you know, and you've got a couple of players, and Diaz comes in, but you've got players coming in and you think, well, if we've got top quality players, we've sorted that out, because you don't know what's going to happen with Salah. You absolutely don't know what's going to happen with Salah. But you've got Núñez and you're thinking, right, okay, that's kind of sorted. You're not worried about full-back area. So you're kind of getting the blocks in place. I think it's a bit of, not make doing men's harsh, it's not that, but you'll just about get by in midfield because the real creativity is ahead of that midfield. They're not really a team that creates massive amounts from the midfield, are they? They're a team that creates massive amounts from the wide areas. So make sure your full-back areas are sorted. They bought another full-back during the window as well. So I have to mention that, obviously, because I'm contractually have to mention that because he is Scottish. Yep. But Calvin Ramsey's he's young, but you know he's got a lot, and maybe in 2 or 3 years' time he could be good enough. So I do understand what they're doing. I wouldn't be again surprised if they are absolutely on the lookout for one more midfielder. It always amazes me that there's not that ultra creativity that comes from that area. They're really, I mean, do any of them? I'd ask you. I mean, Fabinho, yeah, a bit, but there's nobody that's ultra creative in that midfield, in that three that's often played there.
I guess you'd fancy Thiago to find a pass when it's on.
But numbers, they're not huge, are they?
No.
They're not being huge. So
a lot of style points.
Yeah, and we love it. It's great to watch. But so, you know, maybe that's something that he would look forward to. Someone you're getting in the next point that you get out that midfielder. You think, yeah, get somebody that's got that energy levels, because the demands are you play at those energy levels. But they clearly weren't able to do that. And by the way, they weren't the only team utterly unable to do that in the first week of the season. Yeah. And by the way, I've been racking my brains for the last 2 or 3 days to understand why that's the case. A number of teams just looked unbelievably sluggish. There was quite a few games I watched, there was whole swathes of players that looked as if they were still in pre-season.
Yeah.
Now, I know we started a wee bit early, but they've had a full break this summer. You know, there wasn't a Euros, there wasn't a World Cup, and I've had some ideas of brewing away what's caused it with some of them, but I'll watch it for another couple of weeks to find out. And Liverpool were certainly, it wasn't heavy metal football, was it?
No. Okay, shout when you're willing to share the theory in the next couple of weeks, because what Klopp said was, we're going to look into it and we will find the reason and we will get it sorted. And
he's not the only one.
Yeah.
There's others looking at why it's been sluggish.
Mitrovic picked up where he left off last season. The goal at the back post where he towered over Alexander-Arnold, I was thinking to myself, the last big competitive game we saw Alexander-Arnold was the Champions League final, where again there was There were fingers pointed at him. In this situation, I heard Tony Cascarino making an observation, because he scored quite his fair share of goals, probably coming in at the back post, Alan Mitrovic in that situation. And he said, what you really want a defender to do there, because it's not a great situation for a defender. Things are against you, forwards got to run on you, you're backing off. He said the really great defenders he played against, they stood tall and they just kept backing aggressively into me when I was going up to win a header. Back right into me, just put me off enough. And Alexander-Arnold seemed to almost be flat-footed and hunched over, like cowering almost, and allowed himself to be towered over. And he just, like, these defensive instincts have been talked about maybe a bit too much in the past, but it is another area, or another moment where you think opposition will look at Alexander-Arnold and say there's just a definite weakness there.
Yeah, I think most people know it. He's not a classic defender. He's not an absolutely natural defender. But it makes up for that for what it does the other way.
Yeah.
And pace-wise, he's got plenty of that as well. But that pure physicality, he's generally not got it. Funnily enough, Robertson's better slightly on the other side, because he'll do that. He'll get done at the back post because he's smaller than Alexander-Arnold. But he'll generally put his body in there. There's plenty of times, us smaller players, when we played, we knew we're not going to win that one. What you do is you put your body in a position where it's really difficult for a bigger player to go and get a clean header. You don't even need to go up for a header. You just affect his movement. And Cascarino was absolutely right. That's what you do. They affect the movement. But he didn't, did he? And it kind of leads on to another point where that ball's played at the back post. It came over the top of him. I'll tell you what, there's been seasons recently that would have been chopped off. They'd have said, oh, you used your hand and you pushed on top of him. And the joy of the start of this season is not happening. The referees actually are trying to stick to it and allow a little more physicality in the game. And certainly players like Alexander-Arnold, even defensive positioning is not particularly good for him. Right. Not just at the back post, that's one thing. But because he spends so much time up sort of flying forward, there's always a gap in there. There's always a gap behind him. And it's the biggest weakness that Liverpool have got. But having said that, if he's creating 20 or 30 or 40 chances a season, I think you're going to go, yeah, fair enough. But you're right, there is a weakness defensively, and going forward, maybe for England, if they're looking at him or Reece James, they might think, well, no one's going to do that to Reece James, are they?
No.
Because of his physicality. So, that's maybe one mark down against him. But having said that, there's plenty of marks for him.
It sounds overly critical. I can see why Klopp says over the course of 38 games, the good outweighs the bad. I suspect Southgate thinks in one-off games, we got to be more conservative.
And that's particularly who you're playing against as well. If you're playing against a team that are particularly physical in that area, you might not choose them. And you're absolutely right. And Southgate knows that.
Shoot down this question very quickly and we can move on if you want, because Van Dijk is one of most people's favourite players, mine included. I was watching on Saturday and there were times where he's on the ball and it struck me there is a very fine line between having an air of authority on the ball and showing confidence of the ball and frankly just being sluggish. And I think of the way Jordan Henderson injects tempo with his passing. And honestly, there were times where Van Dijk sucked all tempo out of the play because he was so languid. And again, it's a fine line between sluggish and air of authority. I thought maybe, like, if he... I don't want to say to him, like, get the rhythm going a bit more. You're good enough to do it. But I thought he was maybe more in the sluggish category.
Right. Is it possibly saying the unsayable? That maybe Van Dijk isn't the player he was? And I think we're going to find out this season. Okay. Last season, there was a couple of times I looked and I thought, why are you standing square? Really a couple of times. And being square was what caused the penalty as well this time. But it happened a few times last season. There's a reason why centre-backs do that. I remember Rio Ferdinand doing it nearer the end of his career. Because they don't want to chase. They want to just win the ball. Right. They want to chase. And that's why they do it. I mean, by the way, that's not to abuse a player. I watch Thiago Silva doing it a lot now. But he's absolutely brilliant at it. Because he doesn't want to chase anyone, because he won't catch them, right? I'm going to watch, and I think everyone should watch Van Dijk. He's fabulous. He's a wonderful player. I love him to bits, and I've talked to you many times about in the past. Is Van Dijk the player he was 2-3 years ago, before his injuries? I don't know. I think we'll find out the answer to that question this season. If that happens again, what happened there, because it happened a couple of times last season, if he gets caught getting a player and standing square and sticking a leg out, it's not good defending. It's not. He never did that. I've watched him for years and years and years and years. He never did it because he always cruised into positions where he would walk away with the ball. So keep an eye on him and see if is it the injury has slowed him down, or is it something else? Maybe he's just a wee bit sluggish at the start of the season. That's one for fans to keep an eye on.
Yes, for sure. And if he's still dallying on the ball in 6 weeks' time, then I'll bring it up with you again. So I'll park that one for now. I thought it was a touch unfair, even as I was saying it. You were at Goodison on Saturday.
Yeah, do you know what? I don't often get kind of mawkish when I'm talking about football, but the old days, I rarely ever talk about, the old days. But it reminded me of my first day when I played my first game for Everton, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and Goodison was bouncing, and the vibrancy and the sunshine and the excitement, and then the game started. Oh, it was awful.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, Everton chased and carried for about 20 minutes. But honestly, it was really, I don't know, apart from the penalty kick, and even that wasn't very memorable. So few memorable things happened in that game. And that sluggishness we're talking about, which may well be something got to do with starts of the season and carryovers from other teams. It might be these things, right? But both teams showed it. And Chelsea looked really, really sluggish. They did not look like... I mean, if you had to look at it in that kind of form, you're not saying top four. No. You're absolutely not saying top four. But, it's early days yet. And it was a real shame because... And there was a number of things that happened. There was the terrible injury to Godfrey. Well, turns out it's a bad injury. It's not a terrible injury. It could have been... We thought it was terrible, but it's get over it and he'll be back in 2 or 3 months, hopefully. Something happened in the crowd. That stopped the game again. It was such a bitty game. There was no structure to it. There was no smoothness to it. There was no control of it. But in simple terms, nobody played very well.
No, it's funny. I watched the second half in full, and I tuned in like 2-3 minutes into the second half, and the crowd gives you, anytime you turn on a match, the crowd gives you an indication of what you're arriving into, and it was so dead. And I thought, okay, maybe it's a lull in play, but it was dead right the way through. Do you know? You suspect in part because Goodison had recognised fairly acutely at that stage that they had zero threat.
Oh yeah, that's definitely part of it. But they were ready to move. They were ready to, and Goodison's always like that. And the fans had put so much into the end of last season to help Everton get over the line. And I was at the fan park beforehand. I was talking to some Everton fans and doing a wee bit for the fans beforehand. And they were buzzing. They were really up for it, and they made that phenomenal noise. And as I said, then the game started, and they just couldn't get the players. And then they chucked it, and then the players were, it was just such hard work, and there was no ingenuity, inventiveness. Gordon would sometimes do that, but he was playing up front, and he basically can't really do that to any great level against good defenders. And he was up against a good defender. If you had to take positives out of it, if you were almost anyone, Cucurella come on and livened up the game. Koulibaly, when Rudiger left Chelsea, I thought, oh, they have got a gigantic problem. And then you watch Koulibaly and you think, oh no, that's fine. He's okay. He's going to be good enough. Those two were interesting. And I will admit, I reserve judgment to some degree, but probably the most skillful player on the pitch by a distance was Raheem Sterling. There was moments, and he did have some really quite sparkling moments that were, if the rest of the team could play with that sort of spark, then they'll be a good team. But Chelsea are still, they're a distance behind. And funnily enough, I met up, sorry to throw this in here, but Clang, I got invited into the boardroom afterwards, and ended up, that embarrassing moment. Who do I talk to? Do I talk to the Everton board, or do I talk to the Chelsea board? I ended up talking to the Chelsea board because it was Barbara Sharon, one of the board members there, and I've known her for a number of years. And it was really interesting to talk to them. Well, I tried to listen as much as possible because they're new into the game. And one thing I will say about them, they are disarmingly positive, disarmingly excited about it all. Right. Todd Bowley wasn't there, but 2 or 3 others were there, and I come away from it thinking, yeah, you'll make mistakes, but do you know what? They'll be with the absolute right attitude. And I was desperate to say to them, look, you need another centre-back. Get out there now. Come on, don't muck about. But I think they know it. I think they've been told it.
So have Chelsea been like stripped of all their institutional knowledge from like a footballing perspective? Because certainly the read from people when they saw 70 million on Cucurella, as nice a player as he is wow, this is naive in the extreme.
Especially if you've got Chilwell and you've got, Emerson, you've got Alonso,
yeah.
And you need a centre back. You're thinking, whoa, wait a minute. But they've spent a lot of money, and it looks as if they're quite comfortable spending quite a lot more money. And if they could get another centre half that's capable, and then when you watch that energy level that Cucurella brings, now others, will have that as the season progresses, but he always has that. So, it's a lot of money. Maybe more than the value, but I still think it's going to be a very, very good signing for Chelsea. I think they've overdone the naivety. I did say one thing, and you'll think I'm a crawler, okay? Mm-hmm. Everyone here, you'll think I'm a crawler. But they asked me what did I think of it, a couple of the board members, and I said, there's probably the 3 liveliest players in the park, the 3 you just bought. And that's true, though. And I wasn't being a crawler. Yeah, it's actually true. So they it's not that bad a start. It's not that naive, but they will make mistakes. But they definitely need, if they're going to get top 4, they need another centre back. There's not even a question about that. They cannot get away without it.
As an aside, by the way, because I think clock is going to kill us here. We're not going to get to touch on United or Spurs to any great degree, but it's a long season. We'll do that as the weeks go by. Just an aside from that game, Dele Alli came on and was once upon a time such a brilliant talent. Was desperately hoping that over this summer he would pitch up on day one, super fit, super lean, ready to go, and he just didn't. He didn't look fit, and then when he was on the pitch, he looked to be really struggling in the 20 minutes he played to make an impact. You'd have massive worry. Like, this feels like last chance saloon for him, and it doesn't look like he's had the summer he needed to have.
But then playing up front on his own, that's not his type of player.
Sure.
He was never that type.
But even physically, he just didn't look like where he needs to be.
I would agree. I'll hold up just one more hope for him, that when Dominic Calvert-Lewin's back and he can play as a 10, see, he played him as a 10, one side, or 6 and 8 beside, Gordon, and going off to Calvert-Lewin, that actually might work okay. That might work okay. But we've hoped and hoped and hoped for a long, long time. You think back of when Dele Alli was the kid coming through, the guy that was going to be, off the striker or left attacking midfielder for England. And then just try and think of how many players are ahead of him now. There are dozens of players ahead of him now. In all honesty, it looks like hunger. It looks like if you're going to make it at top level, you need lots of things. You need ability, you need everything. But boy, you need to be hungry. And he never quite looks it, does he, to the level you need him to be. If he got that hunger from somewhere, then maybe. Yeah. But I agree with you. It wasn't on show. It wasn't on show on Saturday.
We'll absolutely talk Arsenal and Spurs next Monday. Let's make a point of doing that. Before you go, we've about 90 seconds or so. It would be remiss not to get your thoughts on the never-ending soap opera at Old Trafford.
Honestly, do you know, every time a manager comes in, you think, it'll be different this time, and he knows his stuff, and he'll have a long-term plan, and then you get beat one game, and then you start trying to buy players, and you go, what? You're buying him? You're getting Arnautovic? Really? Is that the big game plan? Now, players like Arnautovic, I don't know if he's signed yet, they were talking about, they know that certainly sounds as if they're looking for him.
Yeah.
And Rabiot as well.
Yeah, they've got Rabiot. They've got Rabiot.
Right, so, and you're thinking, good luck, mate. I mean, really, good luck, mate. If you're going to try and, if you look around at teams that are incredibly successful, they've got amazing team spirit, they work as a unit, they're hardworking, they're all the things that type of player isn't. You just think, oh, come on. You almost feel a wee bit saddened that, and it might work. You never know, it might work. But boy, it doesn't look as if, when I say work, it doesn't look as if those are signings, and that group, it's a group that's going to get them to top 4. And can we see that right out there just now? Is that taking a chance?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Erling Haaland's going to score goals. United won't finish top 4. I think you're safe. But there was none of the high pressing, high energy that was promised during pre-season either. You know, it was just all very
well,
flat.
I hope they don't ask Christian Eriksen to be the front of that. Come on.
Yeah.
Exactly. You need the right people to do it. Martial, for all the fact that he is a lovely player, has never flourished in the way I hoped he would, because he has got great technical skills. That's not his game either. Who's going to be the player to do that everyone else will say, yeah, I'm going to come up behind you? It's not going to be Cristiano Ronaldo. I'd be amazed if it's Arnautovic. He's one of the ones that does that. Chasing, runs really close and just misses it and gets passed by. And now the fans go, yeah. And other players go, you get. because it's just show. We shall see if that continues to be the case.
Pat, thank you so much. Looking forward to the season ahead. I suspect we'll have lots to talk about every Monday evening. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. See you
Cheers.
soon.
Pat Nevin with us on a Monday evening. And, we'll do a few more Premier League pieces across the week. We will touch on Spurs and Arsenal for sure with Pat next week. Our football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Back in 1 sec.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, get all the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Looking for a great value break in Ireland this summer? GoBreaks.ie will find the best